All right. Hello, everybody. We are in the green room with John Connolly tonight, and tonight we're going to be talking Pro Tools. And I've been talking about this for a few days now. And so, what I'm hoping to do is get a bunch of viewers, and like 300 or 400 viewers, and then we're going to talk Pro Tools. And what we're going to do is do an introduction to Pro Tools, and I'm going to take questions and phone calls after John gives a little bit of an overview on Pro Tools and what the aspects and what it all does. And I'm going to kind of leave it up to John because he teaches Pro Tools at Berklee School of Music. He has a Pro Tools class there, and he's been the Pro Tools guru in LA for what, 25, 30 years now, John?
Been here for a while.
So we actually have a viewer. So do you want to get started on an introduction to Pro Tools?
Yeah, I do. So, what I want to cover tonight, and this is just an intro, so that if you're new to Pro Tools, hopefully this will help you get started. And if you're an existing Pro Tools user, hopefully we'll give you some nuggets that will be helpful to you. And I think we'll be able to do that regardless of what your level is. And Jeff and I have been talking about this, and we'll carry on and do some more focused topics within Pro Tools. But this is an intro review for some, new for others. This will include, what Pro Tools software or hardware do I need if you are not already a user? What will it take to get you into Pro Tools? We want to do that. And also my top 10 keyboard shortcuts. There's a gazillion shortcuts inside Pro Tools application. And, that's great. That's awesome. But here's 10 that is, to me, a bite-size amount of shortcuts to wrap your head around that will help you, I think anyway, get going and will benefit your day-to-day work in Pro Tools, whatever it may be. So, which leads me to my next thing. It doesn't matter what you're doing. So if you're a voiceover talent, if you're a vocalist, if you're a musician, if you're an audio engineer, or aspiring to be any of those, and you want to get into Pro Tools, what we're going to cover tonight, it kind of covers everybody. It's not aimed at musicians or post-production. It kind of covers the whole thing. All of this applies to whatever you might be doing in Pro Tools. So we'll create a new session. We'll get audio into it. We'll do some quick editing, and then we'll spit something out the other end of Pro Tools. So before we get started, though, if you're not already a Pro Tools user, what do you need? You need a Mac or a PC. PCs, Windows 10, Windows 8, or I should say Windows 7, Windows 10. I'm a Mac guy, so bear with me. If you're an Apple or a Mac user, all of the latest operating systems are supported: Catalina, Mojave, High Sierra. And you need to have a relatively new computer, but you don't have to have a brand one. And when I say relatively new, what is that? That's probably within the last 3 to 5 years. If you've bought a computer in that time frame, it's going to be plenty enough powerful to do a lot of work inside Pro Tools. And you want to have it minimum 16 gigs. If you have 8 gigs of RAM in your Mac or your PC, you could get by with it. 16 is strongly recommended. And of course, if you have more than that, that's even better. So Mac or PC. Current versions on the Windows side is Windows 10. Current version on the Mac side is Catalina, and 16 gigs of RAM, and you're pretty good. So what about hardware? Audio interface. So just about any audio interface you could possibly imagine is going to work. And when I say that, it does not require an Avid or Digidesign audio interface. It could be Focusrite. It could be Universal Audio. It could be Presonus. It could be Audio, whatever audio interface cheap or expensive you want to use is going to be fine. And audio interfaces start probably in the $100 range or $200 range. I just bought, in fact, let me grab it here. Um, oh shoot, this is an example of an audio interface. I don't know if you can see it as a Focusrite, and this was under $200 or about $200. This is the Scarlett 4i4. It connects to a Mac or a PC via USB or USB-C. Either way, you can get one that's even cheaper than this. And basically, the differences between the majority of these audio interfaces is how many inputs and outputs do they have. If you're a voiceover artist, basically you need one input, and you can find an audio interface that has a single mic pre in it for probably $100 or so. So anyway, you don't need to spend a lot of money. And of course, if you're going to record through a microphone, you need a microphone, or you can plug your guitar, whatever your instrument is. So just about any audio interface. Now, Pro Tools software, what do you need? So there's basically 3 versions of Pro Tools software. The first one is called Pro Tools First. It's free. It's available for both Mac and Windows systems. You can download it right now. Go to avid.com, create your avid.com account. You can download Pro Tools, and it's limited definitely in track count and functionality, but it's a good way to get started. You can record, I want to say it's got up to 16 tracks of audio, something like that. So again, if you're a voiceover or artist or a vocalist, it's more than enough. You can put a couple tracks of music in, and have several audio tracks for your vocals. You can stack and layer and harmonize and all that stuff right within Pro Tools First. The paid versions are Pro Tools and Pro Tools Ultimate, and a Pro Tools version, which is, I call it Pro Tools Standard, you can subscribe to on a monthly basis, or you can buy it outright. The outright purchase price is about $600 list, but you can get it for cheaper than that. I want to say $450, something like that. Monthly subscription is about, I want to say $30, $25 a month. Supposedly, and I haven't pushed this to the test, Avid is giving 30-day licenses out right now because of the whole COVID-19 thing, for people that are hurting, who are not working, and want to get up and running or keep their subscription going. So you can get a temporary license from Avid. So that would allow you to run Pro Tools Standard, 128 tracks, all the editing functionality, full on automation, full on MIDI, all that stuff that you need to do in Pro Tools. And of course, Pro Tools Ultimate is the big version, $2,500 to buy it outright, or about, I want to say $80 a month to subscribe. And that would be cool if you need, you have a larger system, you're recording live bands, multiple inputs, and you need, all the bells and whistles that you can imagine. For most people, Pro Tools Standard is it. The difference between those 2 versions, Pro Tools Standard and Pro Tools Ultimate, is not that great anymore. It used to be quite a bit of difference there between the 2 versions, but Pro Tools Standard is fully capable of doing just about everything that you need to do. All right, so before we get into it, any questions, Jeff?
No questions yet. And I will say that I have a subscription for, I guess it's a full version, and I do, I've recorded 24, 30 tracks on my laptop. It's $24 a month. And I don't know what the limitations are because I've never tested it, but $24 a month isn't bad for stuff that I want to do in recording drums and a band. And I do a lot of live recording. So if I wanted to go out and record a band and multi-track a band, I could use 24 inputs and record it into Pro Tools on my laptop. And it works. For $24 a month, it's not bad.
Yeah. So why Pro Tools over any of the other applications? There's a lot of great apps out there, Logic and Cubase and Digital Performer and Studio One, and I'm sure the Reaper. There's a bunch of others out there. All of them are quite powerful, and the functionality of all those apps definitely overlap. But why Pro Tools? Well, um, yeah, if you want to get a job in the post production world, TV and film, audio for TV or for film, it's going to be Pro Tools, because the majority. I don't know of any studios doing TV and film post production that are not using Pro Tools here in LA. Um, but and then of course the music studios are all Pro Tools, but you'll find other applications in there as well. So if you're a composer and you're writing songs, writing music for film, you might use Logic or Cubase, and oftentimes those projects end up in a Pro Tools session anyway. So anyway, all
Can I
right.
I just want to
Yeah.
interject one thing though. For Pro Tools, and especially now, there is going to be a boom in content on stream, online content, streaming and online. And knowing Pro Tools, if you wanted to get into some sort of voiceover or recording a band or recording music and get music placed, now would be a good time to get brushed up on Pro Tools and get it, because there's going to be a lot of opportunities for content and music and voiceovers in online content. That's just sort of what I'm hearing through all the music world. A lot of musicians are starting to do their home studios, and so there's going to be a lot of room for that kind of growth. I think I'm just putting out there an observation.
Yeah, I think that's true. I think the other half of that is, if you know Pro Tools, you'll have a lot of people that you can easily collaborate with, or finish your project. Maybe you're a vocalist and you've recorded and you've edited this project, but you're not comfortable mixing it. You can easily send off your Pro Tools session and audio files to someone else, and they can mix it, or they can contribute to it. Maybe they can add whatever their instrument is to it. So finding people to collaborate with and to at whatever level is quite easy to do within Pro Tools. So anyway, I have Pro Tools open. I'm going to get into it. And for time's sake, I didn't make you sit through the launch. It only takes a few seconds. But when you open up Pro Tools, this is the window that you get to. It's the dashboard. And this is where you create new sessions, open your recent sessions or projects, which are cloud collaborated sessions. If you want to share this with somebody else via the cloud, that would be a session that's called a project. And it also allows me in this dashboard window to select the sample rate and the bit depth, and of course name it and place it. Where do I want to put this on my system? So we're going to do a name here. I don't know what should we call this, the Jeff Nuke show.
Sure.
Jeff
Sure.
Nuke.
Are you going to put that on the window on the screen
Oh, I'm sorry. I sure am.
so
Thank you
we
for
can see what
reminding
you're
me.
doing?
There we go. That would help.
Yeah.
Sorry. So the dashboard window, create brand new sessions,
I don't see it
blank.
yet. I'm
You can
still
see it?
waiting. No,
No, not yet.
there it is. There it's coming. Okay. Yep, it's there now.
All right. How many audio engineers does it take to do a
Oh
Facebook
wait, no, it's
video?
I'm still no. Wait, hold on. It's loading really slow. Why? I'm not. Do I have to do something to what you're doing?
Let me get rid of some of my other stuff.
Uh, for it's not coming through on my screen, John.
All right. Let me try again. I'm going to get rid of some 15 different windows I have open. Maybe that's causing problems with my upload
Yeah.
speed. Okay. All right. I'll go over there, get rid of that. You've connected from elsewhere. Okay. So we don't want that either.
You just want to share your whole screen,
Right.
and okay, now I got you back, but you
Okay.
want to,
Try it again.
yeah.
Screen one, share.
Oh, there. Okay, there I see it. Okay, I see what you did.
We good?
Yes.
All right. Sorry about that. Would help if you could
What's
see
going
what
on?
I'm
See what's
talking
going
about.
on.
That would make
There
sense.
we go. All right. Okay. So you know what? It's interesting how you did that. Okay. Okay. Go for it.
All right. So the dashboard window. Now you don't have to look at me and Jeff. That's probably a good thing. The dashboard window is where it all starts. You'll launch Pro Tools, it opens up to this window. And as I've said, you can create a brand new blank session. You can create a brand new session from a template that's part of Pro Tools already or templates that you've created on your own. You can open up recent sessions, or you can open up projects that you've created in the cloud to collaborate with others. So I'm going to name this show Jeff News Show, and we'll call it Jeff News. I just wiped that out, and we'll put today's date for 21.
Hmm.
That's got a significant date. And for sample rate, I tend to work at 48K. So sample rate is basically the resolution of the audio that you're going to record or import into this session. You can kind of compare it to, you know, a camera in megapixels, right? The higher the sample rate, the better the quality is. However, at some point, it's not conducive to having larger sessions. The higher the sample rate, the more your computer's going to work to process that audio. So think about a CD is 44,100 kilohertz sample rate, which is the lowest sample rate that Pro Tools will do. Some people record at that sample rate. I tend to go with 48K, 48,000 samples per second. Almost all TV and film is done at 48K. And then, of course, for the file type, you have two choices, WAV or AIFF. It doesn't really matter either way. And you can have both of those file types mixed into one session at the same time. Doesn't really matter.
John,
Yeah.
can I ask what is a sample rate in case somebody watching doesn't understand what a sample rate is?
Sample rate is basically a sample is a snapshot of a particular point of audio in time. And when they refer to sample rate, they're talking about how many samples or how many snapshots within 1 second time. So we're talking about at 48K or 48,000 snapshots of your audio in a single second, in a second's worth of time. The other, like I said, CD is 44,100 samples per second. And of course, my system will go all the way up to 192,000 samples per second. Not many people record at that high of a sample rate. Some do. There are a good number of people that record at a 96K sample rate. I tend to stick with 48K. Ultimately, your session, your finished product has to come down to a sample rate that can be played back on, a computer or an iPod or an iPhone or a CD, whatever the case may be. So there's a lot of arguments to record at a higher sample rate and then make your finished product, bounce it down to a lower sample rate with proper processing to get it there gracefully. But for the most of the stuff I'm doing, it's 48K. And like I said, most TV and film is all done at 48K sample rate, 48,000 samples per second. And then the bit depth refers to kind of the quality of each of those samples. So within each sample, how detailed is that information in a nutshell? And you have 16, 24, or 32-bit float options, and doesn't really matter that much. I'd say go with 24-bit. A CD is 16-bit. So a CD is 16-bit, 44.1. Remember when the term CD quality meant really good? That's the lowest sample rate that you can do. That's the lowest quality that you can create, not only Pro Tools, but any application these days. So my suggestion would be start with 48K, 24-bit. You're good to go. And you can always change that after the fact and experiment and see if you notice the difference. If I'm doing a bunch of, rock guitars and synthesizers and stuff, doesn't really matter. If I was recording an acoustic piano in a nice studio with really nice mics and nice gear, then I would probably consider going to 96K or maybe even 192K sample rates. But if I'm just, fooling around, 48K is going to be it for the majority of your projects. All right. And lastly, on the bottom is where do I want to put this? So this is a session that I'm going to create that's going to live locally on my computer. I have a bunch of hard drives here. You can see that I can put that on. So I'm going to have it prompt for location, and I'm going to put it in my audio drive in my Pro Tools sessions folder. It's called the Jeff News Show. I'm going to create a new folder called the Jeff News because I think there's going to be more of these show.
You can put that directly onto an external hard drive, correct?
Absolutely. I have a bunch of them on my desktop right here.
Right.
And that's what well, it's actually internal to my Mac Pro. I've got one of the old school Mac Pro towers. So these drives here are internal, but you can have an external USB or Thunderbolt or Firewire, depending on how old your computer is. And that's actually a good idea to put your sessions on an external drive. And as far as, compatibility and all that, there's more info on that we can give you. All right. So I'm in Pro Tools. This is the edit window. There's two windows in Pro Tools that you really need to be concerned about. And it's the edit window and the mix window. They're blank because I don't have any tracks in here, right? So the edit window is where you're going to be spending most of your time. I'm going to go to the track menu, new, and I'm just going to create 8 mono audio tracks. There they are. I go over to the mix window. I'm going back and forth. On a Mac, it's Command equals. That will toggle me back and forth. Or I can go from window menu to mix or window menu to edit, right? Take me back and forth. So when Pro Tools was originally designed, they designed it with the audio engineer in mind. And at that time, old school, we call them old school now, analog or digital. They had digital decks, tape decks at that time, and digital consoles. But the premise here is the edit window is your tape deck. That's where you record audio and see the waveform. You can edit it, cut, copy, paste, chop it up, process it, do whatever you want. And the mix window is like your mixer, right? So if you've ever used a mixer before of any kind, a small mixer or a large one, you're going to be familiar with this mix window, right? You've got a fader for each track. You've got a pan knob. You have sends or aux sends, as you might see on another console, right? So instead of a knob there, I have a fader. And then up at the top, we've got inserts. And this is where I can add EQs, compressors, processing. There's a gazillion plugins that you can add. There's Pro Tools stock version comes with, I don't know how many tens, if not 100 or 150 plugins. I can't remember. Everything you need comes with, within the stock version of Pro Tools. EQs, compressors, reverbs, delays, all that stuff. But of course, you can add literally hundreds of plugins from third-party vendors, from virtual instruments to EQs, all kinds of processing. That's a topic we could spend a whole show on and still not cover it. So anyway, this is the mix window. It operates just like a mixer. The terminology that Pro Tools uses is aimed at the audio engineer as well, right? So a lot of the terms that you may be familiar with, aux sends or sends, inserts or the plugins, processing, busing, tracks, all that sort of stuff is designed to be familiar with people that are coming from that environment. And that might be one of the differences that you would consider when you're talking about Logic, for example. Pro Tools was aimed at the audio engineer and mixer, and Logic was more aimed at composer, songwriter, and its feature set is refined and optimized for that sort of thing, which makes it really good for that. The functionality of the two definitely overlap, and they do a lot of the similar things, but that's one way to compare them, if that helps any. All right, so here's a little overview of the Pro Tools edit window. On the far left, this is my tracks list. This gives me a list of every track that I've created in this session, and I can show or hide any of these tracks by clicking on the dot here to the left of each track. And of course, it lists by track name, and I haven't named any of those tracks. But by hiding a track, I'm just removing it from the screen. It will still play back if there's audio on it. I'm not disabling it. I'm just removing it visually from the screen. That's the track list. And as your session gets larger and your track count gets higher, that's a handy place to kind of help you find, tracks that you might be looking for. On the far right side is my clip list. This is where I will find any audio clips or MIDI clips or video clips that I have within this session. So for example, if I create a 1K tone audio file here, There it is, and you'll notice that it took on the name of the track. So I broke my own, first rule: name your tracks before you start. Right. So I'm going to double click on the track name over here, and I'm going to call it John VO. Now, anything that I create on that session will take on that name and, of course, a number. As I add more audio files to this recording, they'll sequentially be listed, John VO1, John VO2, etc. It's helpful to navigate that clip list. But more importantly, it's more helpful to navigate the tracks in the session if you name them properly. It allows you to find your way through things easier.
John, can I interrupt you for a minute?
Sure.
What is the how does having all of the clips off to the right-hand side, how does that help? Are you able to drag those clips around from that clip window?
Yeah, so more often than not, you won't need to get into that clip list. So some people will actually close it so that you can have some more screen real estate. But in the event that, let's say, I deleted this clip, I just selected it and hit delete key, it's no longer on the track. Of course, I could undo that to bring it back. But let's say I didn't do that. I could always drag that clip back out from the clip list and
Oh,
bring it out there.
so
Right.
it'll stay there even if I deleted it off of the track.
Yes, if you delete audio from the timeline or the tracks, it still exists in the clip list.
All
So
right.
it's quite possible and very likely that you will have many items in your clip list, and not all of those items will live on a track. You might do 2 or 3 different takes of a solo or whatever it is you're recording, and decide you don't like take 1 and take 2 at this moment, but you want to keep 3 in the timeline. But later on, you want to come back and listen to take 1 and take 2. You can drag them back out on a track and get to them. That's just one way to do that.
Mm.
All right. So at the top of the window now, if you have Pro Tools open, your view may look a little bit different. Up at the top, you've got your modes: slip, shuffle, spot, and grid. That's usually open by default. You've got your tools over here. That's usually open by default as well. And your big counter. Right now, I'm looking at minutes and seconds. I can switch that to bars and beats if I'm doing music. But this section from midway over to the right may or may not look like this, and you can show or hide different aspects of Pro Tools, functions, transport, grid and nudge and MIDI controls, all that, by this little menu in the upper right corner of your edit window. And that will allow you to show or hide these different things. I usually try to keep everything open. I want to take advantage of that real estate up there. And of course, my monitor is big. So if you're on a laptop or a smaller screen, you may opt to hide some of those things. So those things would be the grid and the nudge value. We're going to come back to that in a second. Your transport functions, right? This is how you start and stop playback, or one way to do it. Record, enable your transport. Pre and post roll, that's handy to have visible so you can see if you've got a pre-roll enabled or not. Your MIDI controls, if you're doing music composition inside Pro Tools with MIDI, there's a whole slew of virtual instruments that come with Pro Tools systems at no additional cost. Of course, you can add a gazillion others, but there's great pianos and keyboards and drums and all kinds of variety of loops and enough virtual instruments to get you up and running, especially from a songwriting standpoint. Let you get the idea out of your head, get it into Pro Tools. A lot of times people use them as is. Sometimes they may use that as a reference for a musician to hear it so that you could play, a keyboard part that maybe you've put down as MIDI. Anyway, so the MIDI controls, the transport functions are all visible or not based on your edit window view selector up here at the top. All right, so on my tracks, I've got 8 tracks here. I've created 8. I've named one of them. And your view may look a little bit different here as well. So you have the ability to show or hide different aspects of each track. In this example, I have, of course, my track name. That's always there. I can't get rid of that. But yours might look like this. I tend to choose, and I'm clicking on this little other version of the edit window view selector in the timeline. that allows me to show the IO view. I always like to have that visible because I can see what input and output is been selected for that track, but it also allows me to see the volume, right? So I can click on the volume and change the volume level of that track, or I can pan the track right from there. And these are the same parameters that I would be doing from the mix window, right? So if I do it over here, you'll see this change, right? Here's my volume and here's my pan. It's the same thing as doing it here. Of course, the window disappears when I do that. Let's try this. Move that out of the way, bring this over. So if I change the volume here, I'm changing the volume in the mix window. They're one and the same, right? So this allows you to kind of stick in the edit window and not have to bounce back and forth frequently. So that's the IO view. I tend to have that open all the time. The other one I often have in this case is inserts. So this will show me plugins, and I've got an EQ plugin down here. I don't have any others on this tracks yet, but I can add them as we go. And virtual instruments, more importantly, we're going to get into that. So this first track, I've created a couple of audio files. So I've created a 1K tone. The shortcut for this, and why would you're thinking, why would I want to create a 1K tone? Bad language, right? So I'll do this. I'm going to select input number 3. That's where my microphone is plugged into on my system. And I'm going to record enable the track. I see my voice coming in on the meter there. And, you know, rule of thumb, try to get your level, your microphone level, and that's usually going to be adjustable from your audio interface or a mic pre that you have. The volume level on the track does not affect the level of the audio being recorded. That's only affecting the level of what you're hearing. So the level that you're getting into Pro Tools is going to be adjusted by your audio interface, gain control, or maybe you've got an external mic pre, something like that. All right, so I've got my level between 50 to 75%-ish, right? That's good. Vocals or voice is very dynamic. You don't want to get it too hot so that it clips and distorts, but you don't want to have it too low where it gets lost in the sound of your room, right? So I'm going to delete these clips here because I don't know how long I'm going to record. Okay, I'm going to go into record. How do I do that? A couple of ways. So I recommend, but you don't have to. I don't know if you can see this. I have a full-size QWERTY keyboard. And when I say full-size, that means that it's got the numeric keypad section on the keyboard. You know, a lot of laptops are not a full-size keyboard, or if you have an iMac.
Show that again, John.
What's that?
Will we show that again?
Sure.
Oh, just a basic keyboard. Okay.
Yeah, QWERTY keyboard, but full-size. And I mean full-size with the numeric keypad.
Oh, okay.
There's a handful of very useful shortcuts there. And the one that I'm going to use right now is number 3 on the numeric keypad. That puts you into record and play simultaneously. So I've dropped my cursor where I want to start recording. I've record enabled my track, John VO track. I've set the input to match where my microphone is connected on my system. And I could either hit record on the transport up here and hit play, or I could just hit number 3. This Pro Tools class is totally fun. So I've got the clip there, and I'm gonna edit it a little bit. So there's a bunch of dead space at the beginning. My environment, my room that I'm recording in is not ideal. I need to kind of clean that up a little bit. So I'm going to use one of my top 10 keyboard shortcuts. It's the E key. Now you have to enable this little A to Z button here. There's 3 of them. We want this one right here next to the timeline, not the one on the clip list and not the one down here in the groups, but the A to Z button closest to the timeline. When that is lit, yellow, a whole handful of very valuable keyboard shortcuts are enabled. And the first one is the E key. So I'm going to select the clip. I'm using the Smart tool, and I'm going to get to that in 1 second. I've selected that clip. I hit the E key.
Hey,
and
actually, I'm sorry. Just hold on 1 second. There's some questions that have sort of come up. Would you want me to save them for the end of this, or
no? Let's take them.
Okay, well, and I actually had this question too. It's like my screen froze up and I didn't see it. So, what is a pre-roll?
Pre-roll. Okay, perfect. Right. So pre-roll is, let's say I've recorded a voiceover or a vocal pass of, let's say, 30 seconds. And it's a keeper. I like it, except for one small section in the middle of that recording is not good. I want to redo it, but I don't want to record the whole thing because it's good. I just want to record that one little bit. Let's use this example right here. This recording is ideal, but I want to re-record this bit right here. I want to keep what's to the right. I want to keep what's to the left. I can go into record and out of record right based on this selection. Make a selection. You're telling Pro Tools where you want the recording, the new recording that I'm going to do to fix that bit, where it's going to start and where it's going to stop. However, I need to hear some audio prior to that punch in location so that I can, especially musically, right? You can kind of get into the vibe of it. You can get the timing right. You need to hear audio before your punch in location. This is my punch in location, the beginning of my selection. If I go into record right now, I'm going to record enable the track, hit 3. It starts immediately. I have no cue, no chance of getting that timing right. So I'm going to enable a pre-roll and I'm going to set it. I'm doing bars and beats, but this is voiceover. So I'm going to switch over to minutes and seconds, and I'm just going to type in a value of 2 seconds. I've clicked on pre-roll to turn it on. So playback is actually going to start 2 seconds prior to my record punch-in location. So if I go in now, I'll hear that. Totally fun, right? So I can hear what's prior to my punch-in location, punch in, do my performance in the appropriate, timing, and then carry on. So pre-roll is playing back prior to your selection. Post-roll is playing back after the selection. Is that clear?
Yeah, yeah, that actually makes that's one thing that I didn't know. So I'm glad somebody asked the question. Thank you, Rick, for the question. Um, so anyway, then continue on where you were.
Was
That
there
helped.
any other questions there before we go?
Not yet.
Okay. So I'm actually going to use a pre-roll right now. I can re-record this bit. Actually, I was gonna edit this before, so I'll do a pre-roll in a second. So I have this clip, and I have all of these edit tools, and I can come up here and select a tool and come down here and use it. But what I tend to use is the Smart tool, and what that does is it combines all of these tools into one. And based on where you put your cursor within a clip, it will change to those different tools and allow you to do all the editing that you need to do without having to go up to the top of the screen to change the tool all the time. So to enable the Smart tool, you click on this little bar. I don't know if you can see it, that covers these middle 3 tools, right? So I can select one tool or I can click on that bar to enable the Smart tool. It's like a multi-tool. Now, depending on where I put the cursor inside the clip, you'll see that the cursor will change into different tools. So the upper half of let me get rid of this view real quick. View, clip gain line. Okay. The upper half of the clip is the selector tool. This is just like a selector tool or a cursor in any other application, Microsoft Word or a text editor. Where do you want your cursor to land? It's the little I beam. That's it. You drop it. That's where playback is going to start, right? I drop my cursor there, hit spacebar to start playback. Oops, I got my pre-roll on. Let me turn it off. Drop my cursor, hit spacebar to start playback. And there it is. So I can use the selector tool to designate where I want playback to start. I can make a selection of audio within the timeline. I can delete it, or I can undo it, make a selection and copy it, and then drop my cursor somewhere else and paste it. This is just like a word processor, but for audio. Just like you would type an email and you make a selection and you cut, copy, and paste, same exact thing. Selector tool. the top half of the clip. The bottom half of the clip is the hand tool, which is this little hand tool up here. That allows you to grab the entire clip, move it forward or backwards or onto another track, whatever you want to do. That grabs the entire thing. Either end of the clip is the trim tool. That's this tool all the way to the left of these selected tools up here. And that allows you to trim up the edges, right? So I have a lot of dead air in this clip. I can see some noise there. I don't want to keep that in my recording. So I'm just going to trim up the boundary. I put the cursor to the left edge of the clip and drag it in. Now I've cleaned that up and I can see this little, bit of waveform here. That's probably when I hit my keyboard to stop the record. I want to get that out of there. So I'm going to put the cursor all the way to the right edge of the clip and it's the trim tool and I trim it up like that. All right. So upper half for the selector tool, bottom half for the hand tool or the grabber tool. Either end of the clip is the bracket or the trim tool. I can trim in or trim out. These are all non-destructive. So if I decide I don't like any of this, I can easily undo out of this. It's not, I'm not committing myself. Right end is the trim tool. Now, if I go to the upper left corner, click and drag, I've got a fade in and I can make it as long or as short as I want to. I'm just clicking and dragging to do that and fade out. And if I do a fade and I want to change the fade type, click and drag, and I can kind of change the fade curve. So all this can be done without having to change any tools.
Was that the volume that you
That
were
was
doing? That
this was the fade type, like what kind of fade out,
okay,
the curve on the fade out.
okay.
So if I change that, whoops, I can do it this way. I can change the fade length after that time. So if I want the fade out to be more, linear, I can make it straight like that. And I don't edit with this, the fade type very often, but every once in a while it's helpful to do that based on what audio you have. All right, so I'm going to shorten up that fade. So that's the Smart tool. I can drop my cursor, I can select the clip, I can fade, I can trim. If I have two clips side by side, let me get rid of this. I'm going to undo those two fades that I've done. And I've got this clip and I want to duplicate it, Command D, right? Just like text in a word processor, you make a selection, you hit Command D on a Mac or Control D on a PC, it duplicates that clip. Now I've got two clips side by side. If I want to crossfade between the two of them, using that same Smart tool, I go down to the lower right or the lower left corner. Either one doesn't matter. Click and drag, and now I can do a crossfade between those two clips. And these are all things that you're going to use quite often, right? Trim, select. I want to delete this little bit in the middle. I'll delete that. I'll select this clip, move it forward. This is a lot of gap here. I'm going to get rid of that. Oh, my selection's too long. I'm in the clip. I'm going to delete that. I'm going to select this clip and that clip and move it forward. Or I can right click and snap to previous so that it lands right next to it. I'll do a crossfade on this one and a fade out on that one. You become very quick with editing after you spend a little bit of time.
Quick question, because you do right click. So do you need, because I have an Apple mouse, right? One of the new kind that doesn't have necessarily a right left click. Is it helpful to have one of the old school kind of mouses that you can actually
yours, the Apple mice, you have the one that has the touch.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it does have a right click.
Oh, really?
If you go to, I don't have one connected, so I'm not going to see it. But yeah, you have to go into your system preferences for mouse and enable secondary click. And then if you click on the right side of the mouse, you'll get a right click.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, if you have a laptop and you're not using a mouse at all, there's for a Mac, it's two fingers and a thumb will allow you to do a right click on a trackpad. On a PC, they usually have they'll have a left click and a right click on the mouse, definitely. But yeah, right clicks can be very helpful. So right click, of course, gives you a lot of different menu options. All right. So let me get rid of this. And let's go back to this clip. So What do I? This Pro Tools class is
We
totally
can't hear it very well though.
all right. This Pro Tools class is totally fun. You're hearing that through the mic, right?
Yeah, yeah, through the speakers.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm going to select this clip. I'm going to hit the E key again to put it away, but I want to blow it up again so it gets even bigger because I've trimmed it down. I want to kind of resize it. E key, expand or enlarge or explode, whatever you want to call it, takes whatever you have selected, blows it up to fill the screen, takes the track height up. So you don't have to do, resize the track and then zoom in and zoom out. That one shortcut, E key, will save you, I don't know, I can't tell you how many mouse clicks each session. So I've got this clip. This Pro Tools class is totally fun. All right, here's a shortcut. Hopefully you won't need it too soon anyway. I'm going to make a selection on fun. I want to process this little bit here. So for those of you that are editing dialogue and you get that 4-letter word in there that you can't air that, here's a shortcut that will allow you to place a 1K tone, the beep. We've all heard the beep. On a Mac, it's Shift Control Option 3. Shift Control Option 3 puts a 1K tone there. Now you'll notice that I didn't select the entire waveform. I left the F in there. This Pro Tools class is totally so you can either beep out bad words or you can beep out words that suggest there was a bad word there to begin with. Anyway, so the shortcut to create a 1K tone is Shift Control Option 3 on a Mac. On a PC, I think it's Shift Control Alt 3, but I'm not sure. I should know that. So that's one shortcut. Hopefully you won't need it. I'm going to undo that. All right. So we've done the Smart tool, the majority of it. Let's get into a little clip gain. Clip gain is the ability to manipulate the volume, right, of this particular clip. It's a little bit low. I probably would have been closer to my microphone and maybe adjusted my mic pre-gain a little bit hotter to get a more robust signal into Pro Tools, but it's okay. I can fix it now. At the lower left corner of every audio clip is this little volume fader. If I click and drag, I can increase the volume. The cool thing about this is that it visually increases the waveform size, and that's accurate representation of the volume differences that I'm making right now. And I can see that there's some, variance in the waveform here. I'm going to need to level that out. So the clip gain that I've used right now is considered static clip gain. I've changed the gain of the entire clip, the same, right? So if I take this clip and I duplicate it, I can use, the clip gain to adjust the volume on a per clip basis. Or I can do multiple clips at the same time. But to do that, and to get into what we consider dynamic clip range, I have to go to the View menu, Clip Gain Line, or right click, right? Right click and show Clip Gain Line. I'll do it again. Clip Gain, Show Line. And this white line right now, if I deselect those clips, it's a black line. That is the clip gain volume level. What I want to do, I'm going to get rid of this clip. I want to focus on this and I want to level this out. So this is a question that I get quite often, especially when you're recording dialogue or vocals. Voice is very dynamic. You'll have some sections that are very loud and some that are very soft. You can use compressors or limiters to do that, but you can also do it easily within clip gain. And I'm going to use dynamic clip gain to do that. So I'm going to trim this back out a little bit. Looks like I trimmed it a little bit early. There we go. And I can see this bit at the end is a little bit soft. So I'm going to make a selection. And I'm using the Smart tool to do this. Again, I'm not changing tools. Click and drag. I'm going to gain that up. I'm just trying to eyeball it and match the level here. Now, I've got kind of an abrupt volume change here, right? It made a 90-degree angle volume change. I try to avoid that because that will potentially be heard and not sound natural. So I'll usually ramp volume changes up or down. Here's a peak that's probably going to create some problems for me later on in terms of when I try to process compression. So I'm going to take that section down. And again, I want to get rid of 90-degree angles. So I'm going to do that. And I'm just going to kind of feather these in a little bit. The back half of this clip is a little bit low, so I can get in here and tweak it that way. This bit looks pretty good. This is pretty good. I'm going to trim that up. I'm going to do a little fade in on the beginning. This whole section here, I think needs to come up a little bit. I'm going to take that up. This one alone is going to come up a little bit more on its. And I'm doing this without listening it, right? That's not good. Every time you do this, you want to listen to it to make sure that the changes you're making sound natural and they don't sound stair-stepped and you have all these volume changes going on. So I'm going to listen to this.
This Pro Tools class is totally fun.
So that sounds pretty good at a glance, right? Listen to it. Use your ear. You can identify if volume changes you're making don't sound natural. But your goal is to have a well-balanced, kind of even volume level for your dialogue or your vocals. Really, that's ultimately what you want, right? If it's a vocal, you want that front and center and the volume level to be consistent. Same with a audio book or a voiceover thing that you might be doing. All right, so I've leveled that out. I'm just visually looking at the waveform. It's much more consistent. Now I can take this same clip gain volume below and increase the gain. And I don't want to go too high. If I push it too high, I'll potentially clip and distort. I don't want that. So I'll bring it down here and I'll play it now.
This Pro Tools class is totally fun.
All right, so it sounds much more consistent. I can continue on with compression and some EQ and stuff, but this is a good place to start. And the cool thing about this is you don't have to worry about screwing up your audio. And some people are worried about, oh, I don't want to wreck it. If you don't like any of this, at any point, you can come and right-click on the clip and go to clip gain and either bypass it. That's the original audio recording right there, right? I can right click, go to clip gain, I'll unbypass it, I'm back to the normal. Or if I just want to get rid of it altogether and get back to the original recording, I can right click, choose clip gain, same thing, and clear it, get rid of it. Now I'm back to ground zero with this recording. So the cool part about it is you don't have to worry about screwing up your audio. This is happening in real time. You're not rendering or, affecting the original audio file. You're simply adding, real-time processing to it. Clip gain is a huge, huge help to do level out your recordings. It's also very handy in other things too, and I don't think we'll have time to get into that, but it can help clean up your recordings. For example, if I have a really noisy environment at home, which I do, I can go in here in between phrases and just dip the gain down in between. And again, I don't want right angles. I'm going to stay away from that. And this will clean up your recordings quite significantly. And you say, well, why don't I just delete that audio in between? If I'm doing an audiobook or a voiceover and there's no music or no other sound within my finished product, having deleted audio in between phrases will sound very unnatural. You hear all these, silent gaps. But if I come in here with clip gain and just reduce the gain in between the phrases by 15, 20 dB, I can effectively clean up this recording without making it sound choppy, and it really will do wonders. Very easy to do. If it's a long recording, it might be a little bit tedious, but there you have it. Okay, so I'm going to undo this, get this back to my processed. I just undid 5 or 6 processes here. I've gained it up. I've edited it. I've faded it in and out. I've got my performance done, and it might be more than one clip. I've only got one here. Your finished product, it might be a 30-second spot, it might be a 1-hour audio book, it might be a 3-minute song, whatever. It might consist of multiple clips. How do I get it out of here? I want to make a selection in the timeline again using the selector tool, and in this case I want this finished product to be just the length of this one clip. So I'm going to, with the selector tool, double click here, we'll select that clip. And that's telling Pro Tools this is where, the bounce to disk is going to start and where it's going to end. And from here, I can go File, bounce to disk. And what do I want to create here? Well, I want to hear this bounce is going to come out of analog 1 and 2. That's where my speakers are routed. I want it to be a WAV file, but I want to create an MP3 as well. So I'm going to do that. Multiple mono, I typically don't want. That would create, if I'm going to do a stereo bounce to disk, that would create two separate files, audio files on your disk. One labeled, whatever the song is, .L for left, and the other one .R for right. If you tried to import that into iTunes or whatever, it would come up as two separate songs. So you don't want multiple mono in this case. I am going to go, well, if it's a VO track and I just want to submit this to an audition, it would probably be a mono summed. I'll stick with the 24-bit 48K. If I'm going to a CD and I want to put this on an audio CD, I would probably do an interleaved or mono, I guess. 16-bit 44.1 is the bit depth and sample rate that I want to create this rendered file that's going to land on a CD. In this case, I'm not going to a CD, so I'm going to go 4824. I'm going to do a multiple mono because this is my voiceover audition that I'm going to submit. I'm going to create an MP3 as well, and I'll just keep the name Jeff News Show 4/21/2020. And I'm going to choose offline. This means that this bounce to disk is going to happen faster than real time. If I uncheck this, the length of this selection is about, well, it's short, 3 seconds, 3.7 seconds, 4 seconds. So it wouldn't take long. But if you had a 30-minute show and you did a bounce to disk and you did not check offline, it would take 30 minutes for that bounce to disk to complete. You don't have to do that. You can check the offline box and it will happen in a fraction of the selecting time. All right, so I'm doing a WAV file and an MP3. I'm going to hit bounce to disk. Here's my MP3 info. I'm going to do the highest bit rate I can, 320, and click OK. And it's done. Now, where do I find that? I don't know if you remember when we started, when I created this session, I put it in a folder on my audio drive. Where is it? It's over here. Pro Tools sessions, and we did the Jeff News Show. And here's my Jeff News Show 4/21/20. That's the folder that was created when I created this session. It was created for me by Pro Tools. Inside this folder, we will find the session document. When I come back to this session later on and I want to open it up again, that's the document that I'm going to double click on to open. The audio files that I've recorded or created live in this audio files folder. And the bounce files that I just created are right here in the bounce files folder. Here's my WAV, Jeff News Show 4/21/2020.wave, and the Jeff News Show 4/21/2020.mp3. So I got one of each. And of course, the MP3 is much smaller in size, allows me to send it over the internet very easy. The WAV file is going to be larger and, better quality as well. Although MP3 can sound pretty close. We won't get into that conversation. All right. So my shortcut list, I don't know how to get that to everybody. Send an email to Jeff. Jeff, what's your email?
Oh, that's right. I was going to put that up, wasn't I?
Yeah. And my website.
Okay. So there's my email address for anybody that's tuned in and wants it. And let's put, get that out. And let's do John's email or website, ProToolsServices.com.
ProToolsServices.com.
Right.
Yeah. And so my files here that I want to get to anybody who wants them, send an email to Jeff. And these are my top 10 keyboard shortcuts. I'll open them up and show you. The challenge with shortcuts in Pro Tools is there's a gazillion of them. And if you open up that document, it's literally like 70 pages of shortcuts, which is awesome, but it's really difficult to pick a couple out that you find useful and then to memorize. So my recommendation or my suggestion is take a look at this, my own top 10 list, and use these. We used a handful of these in the class today. and digest these and get them under your belt so that you don't have to think about them anymore. And we'll dig in on this list a little bit next time. But this is a very handy, reduced keyboard shortcut list that I think every Pro Tools user should know, regardless of if you're a beginner or an advanced. And I think there's some in there that will be helpful to everybody. So the top 10 keyboard shortcut, but there's one for Mac, there's one for Windows. Send Jeff an email and we'll send that out to you.
All right. So that's the pretty much the beginner's Pro Tools deal, correct?
That's intro to Pro Tools. Very intro. We spent an hour, but hopefully that will get people into it. Get your copy. Get yourself a copy of Pro Tools first, and if you have questions about things that you run into, send them to Jeff, and we'll dig in on them next time.
Yeah. So hopefully, if anybody's interested in making this, learning more, or having a really deeper, in-depth conversation with John about Pro Tools, we're going to put together a master class. We may need to get maybe a little bit further. I mean, I don't know where the skill level of any of the people watching, where they were at with it. I know some of the things that you were showing, I didn't even know, and everything you showed is pretty much about all I do, right? With my Pro Tools, and you showed me a couple of things that I didn't, was really cool. I wish I would have known that. So if I wanted to go deeper, it could get really deep in a hurry on stuff. And what would be really good, if anybody's interested in at that level, like mixing a band and editing things, what would be an intermediate step from this?
Well, some review of this, and then digging into like volume automation, some EQ, equalizer, compression, some mixing functions, stuff like that. But let me say this: one of the concerns I get from new users is Pro Tools is intimidating, or it's got too much. And as musicians, who I think most of us on this chat session are, know that whatever your instrument may be, if it's guitar or keys or whatever, if you know 3 chords, you can play a shitload of songs. And if you rock those 3 chords, they're going to sound great. And no one's going to know that you only know 3 chords. They don't need to know. Pro Tools is kind of similar to that. If you can learn your Pro Tools 3 chords, you can get some great results out of Pro Tools. On the other hand, you can go Herbie Hancock on it and go deep and deep and deep, as deep as you want to go, but you don't have to do that to get great results. You can use it in a very basic way and get great results out of recording, editing, and mixing your own projects. So don't worry about becoming an expert. It's not necessary. It's great if you do and you want to invest the time in that. But I think what we're starting with is learning those 3 chords and being able to rock those 3 chords.
Let me give an example of something based on what you just were showing tonight. A gal called in or instant messengered me a lead into my Triple J show that I do. And I took it out of Instant Messenger and put it in Pro Tools and edited part of what she's saying and put some reverb on it. Basically, just what you did. And this is how it sounded. Javon, Jamie, and Jeff in the green room for success. That's right. Okay.
You got your own intro song? I'm a little upset. I want one now.
So, I mean, but this is my point. If I didn't have Pro Tools, there's no way I could have done that. I could have taken that instant messenger bit that she did, edited out of her little talk that she did to me, and clip it out and put a little bit of reverb in it, and then have that little intro. And that was all. If I didn't have Pro Tools, I wouldn't have been able to do that.
Yeah, that sounds great. That's awesome. That's a good example.
Yeah. So we've been at it for an hour and 5 minutes, and I think that's a good intro into Pro Tools. Now we had handful of between 4 and 6 listeners throughout the time. I mean, there's somewhere to start, but a lot of people watch these later, and I know that everything that I've done, people. I get more views in the next couple of days. So we'll let this stew for a couple of days, then we'll schedule something else. And I'm sure if anybody's got questions, they can uh, message me on Facebook or send me an email or get onto your website that's been up there. And hopefully
Yes.
this will take off.
Cool.
All right, John.
Yeah. If there's topics that people want us to cover, hit Jeff with an email.
Yeah. And let's get people into some Pro Tools. And then you can go around to their house when they
That's right. I do make house calls. I do one-on-one training, and that's custom training based on what it is that you want to do. But we're not really doing that just yet.
Not yet. We got to wait until the
So that's why
coronavirus goes down.
we're doing it online.
Yeah. All right, John. Well, I'm going to take us out with our usual song. And
all right, thanks, Jeff.
All right, thank you. And away we go. Oh, I got to